conversation with.
Hello everyone, welcome to another session of In Conversation with. I'm Priyanshi, a visual artist based in Surat, which is in India. And we at Art and Artisans strive to bring sustainable income to artisans and encourage the spread of art knowledge. So today we have Ellis Scheer with us. Thank you, Alice, for joining in. So let me just give like a little bit introduction about her. So Ellis Scheer is a visual artist in Netherlands. She did MA drawing from University of the Arts London in 2018 and her bachelor's in fine arts at Academy of Minerva in Groningen. She explores space within the filmic image through mediums like dry pastels, charcoal, and video installations. So thank you, Alice, so much for joining in, and let's begin talking about your work, your process, and everything. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me so much. My work is kind of fueled by a fascination for theater and cinema and sort of other worlds in general. And I think that kind of comes from my father is a magician. So ever since I was little, I was sort of transported into other worlds and I saw them from backstage as well. So how they were made. And I think that's really something that is still influencing my work very much. And so now I make mostly pastel drawings based on film stills and also installations that are inspired by either movie sets or theater sets sort of in general. So maybe we can start the screen share.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So my drawings, as I said, are based on film stills. And I sort of started collecting film stills when I was doing my bachelor's degree in Groningen. I was sort of collecting moments that I found interesting either because of lighting or interactions between different characters or composition, things like that. At first I was very much interested in acting and sort of facial expressions and how actors would bring emotion to the surface or would translate certain thoughts that actors were having. Those resulted into sort of very large drawings of close-ups of actors' faces. So that's what I started off with. And then when I was doing my MA drawing degree, I sort of wanted to reassess. I wasn't really quite sure what film meant to my practice. So I kind of wanted to determine what exactly it was that I found interesting and if I even wanted to move forward with it. So I started sort of experimenting with different ways of presenting my work to reference to film. So maybe we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, sure. Just 1 second. Yeah.
So for example, by lighting a drawing with a projector, to use that to reference to film, but also using the drawing as a base, as I'm doing in this work. So this was a drawing with a projected image overlapping it, and then the projected image would change into a different film still every 7 seconds. So in that way, the combined narratives of the underlying image and the projected image would change, and that was something that I found very interesting and that made me sort of more aware of what certain narratives were implying. We can go to the next. So something that I noticed was that the living room or living spaces were very interesting to me. I thought that they had, because they are something that we hold as safe and protective, they are sort of vulnerable to the opposite. So you can bring a certain tension into the spaces around the characters that I found very interesting. And maybe go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is again another way of, so I mounted a drawing onto a projection screen. So again, another way of referring to film, but also using drawing. And here again, I try to emphasize the sort of through the space between the characters and the objects around them, sort of a tension between them. Yeah, so I started sort of wondering how I could, what would happen if I translated this two-dimensional space of the drawing into 3 dimensions. And that's sort of how I started working with installation. So obviously the film is documented within a 3-dimensional space, and then it manifests itself onto the cinema screen or the television screen to us as a 2-dimensional plane. And then I wanted to bring that back to the 3rd dimension again. Yeah, what was quite nice about this work as well is that it was made in a sort of a hallway of a art house movie cinema. And so it led in the hallway that led to one of the rooms, and then the visitors would actually use the installation. So this is one of 3. They would use the installations to sit and wait for the film to start. So it was again kind of a transitional space into the movie world, which I quite liked. So yeah,
impressive. Okay. During the pandemic, you did a residency in Ginds, and I have a couple of questions regarding that. But before that, let me just roll the clip. Yeah, I think this is enough. So I
okay.
was just wondering, like, it's such an ASMR moment, first of all. But at the same time, like, how did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so I did the residency at an underground bunker that used to be part of the protective system of Amsterdam. So inside the bunker, it was very there were a few different rooms, and I wanted to do something with those rooms and something with installation, maybe with film as well. I wasn't quite sure at the beginning, but I was sort of thinking about this original function of the bunker as a protective system for Amsterdam, and then I wanted to connect that somehow to the protective quality of the living room or our living spaces, because I'm still really interested in that. And so then I thought I wanted to sort of create a space in an unfamiliar space that doesn't really feel like home, but I wanted to make that feel like home somehow. So that was the idea I started off with. And then simultaneously, I was very inspired by the works I'd seen of Chantal Akerman, who is a Belgian filmmaker, and in particular her movie Jean Dielman, which she made in 1975. And it's a 3.5-hour movie about a woman, and we see her in her living spaces, sort of doing domestic chores and caring for her son as a single mother, and then and also receiving clients as a prostitute to make some money. um, so, but in the movie, those daily chores, those domestic things that she does, they get this, because they're all sort of played out in real time, they get this very hypnotic quality. And I was so inspired by that, and I wanted to do something similar. And I know that Chantal Akerman also made the movie sort of questioning the roles that women get put on by society. But then the movie was made in 1975, so I was curious, like, maybe through making this film, I can sort of discover how that has changed and how it is for a woman in today's society. So yeah, that's how I sort of got the idea to make installations there of living spaces. So I made 3 installations. So one bedroom, 1 living room, and 1 dining room. And then in those spaces I would live and isolate myself completely from the outside world for 3 days and film myself while doing domestic chores and sort of keeping myself to this very strict routine as the woman in this movie did as well.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to know like how because it's quite related to like the pandemic, the things that like it's day-to-day routine where you're just isolated and doing the chores and day-to-day chores. It's quite relatable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so how did you manage to do it? So what were the behind the scenes like? How did you manage to like set it up, the filming process, the editing process, everything? And first of all, how did you manage to live? I don't know, like for 3 days, you lived in there for 3 days, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it was already like isolation and then again another quarantine in that bunker. So I just want to know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that was quite, so I was working there for a period of 3 weeks. So I had quite a bit of time to prepare for the 3 days of isolation there. And yeah, how I did that is I just sort of collected objects from different places, because obviously I had to transform the entire space, or 3 spaces actually. And there were some sort of larger pieces of furniture present in the residency already, so I was very lucky with that, like chairs and tables and things like that. And then I also took a lot of objects from my home because one of my goals was to make the residency feel like home. So I thought that would be fitting. So I chose like curtains and pillows and lamps and things like that, because they were also easy to transport there because I don't have a car and I was traveling there by train every day. So every day I would take a little bit. And then there was also a bicycle present at the residency. So I would cycle around and visit local secondhand shops to pick out like old-fashioned looking pots and pans and things like that. So through very sort of little means, I tried to transform the space. And then, yeah, the 3 days of isolation, I sort of let everyone in my surroundings know that I wasn't going to be in contact for 3 days. And then actually being there was quite horrible because I got very homesick. And it was very, very different from being isolated within my own home, because yeah, we had the lockdown before that. But then I have a lot of windows in my home and I have a very broad view, and inside the bunker I had no daylight at all. So it was very confining and difficult. Yeah, and then the editing process actually came a while later because the experience in the bunker during the isolation was so negative. I sort of didn't want to think about it for a while. And then, but about a month later, I came back to it and I reviewed the footage I shot, and was sort of able to edit it within the comfort of my own home, which was nice.
Yeah. So I was wondering, so like how many takes were there while you were filming? Like, so did you like had couple of takes or single takes, or you just like had the whole script in your mind and you just like executed it in for 3 days? Like why it took you like 3 days to be in there? And was it like any kind of human interaction? So like, you know, like where they like you have like services, like door-to-door services, they put like supplies and then you just take it, so something like that. um so did you have any kind of human interaction like that, or you just stayed in there with all the supplies and all the set and the filming equipments and everything with it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I sort of prepared everything beforehand. I got the food and stuff like that, so I would have enough for 3 days. And the 3 days was actually because in the film by Chantal Akkerman, we also follow the main character for 3 days. So I wanted to make that the same period of time. And my initial plan was to yeah, not have any, or to stay inside the bunker and not have any contact with the outside world. I didn't have any contact, but I did at some point put into my daily routine that I could go outside for half an hour, because I noticed that sort of the fresh air and daylight, I was really missing that, and I don't think I would have held on for 3 days if I didn't do that. And so so I was following this daily routine, and I had certain activities planned out. So, for example, I mean, breakfast was an activity, so I would set up the camera and sit down and have breakfast and film myself while I was doing that. And then, for example, writing and reading and drawing, meditating, those were all sort of part of my daily routine. And for every one of those, I would set up the camera and sit down and do it, and then, yeah, go on with the next thing.
Wow. Wow. And then like how did you select, so like obviously, so were these activities mapped out for like 3 days, or like each day you like filmed it and then you decided which shots you want to take in for the movie?
Yeah, the latter. Yeah. So so I filmed all of it, and then the editing process was quite difficult as well, because some of the shots were very similar to other ones, and then how do you make the decision, like, I want this shot in it and that one not? So I went through this process of bit by bit sort of narrowing down all of the footage I had into bits that I liked, and then making sort of a new structure out of that. So in the film we still follow the 3 days, but yeah, obviously not the entire length of all that I filmed.
Obviously. Yeah. So what was the overall experience? I mean you have pretty much covered it, but still, like, if you want to describe it, how was it?
It was a struggle, I'd say. um, so yeah, inside the bunker, as I said, it was very cold and damp as well. So that, and I on the first day I started getting ill, which was also kind of ironic, because yeah, when you get ill, you have to be isolated for a while, and I was already in isolation. I later got tested and it wasn't COVID, but so that was also part of the discomfort. But so I went into it sort of hoping to find, sort of wanting to research how long it takes to feel at home somewhere. And as I said, I became very homesick, so it was kind of the opposite that I accomplished. But what I did notice was that the very strict daily routine sort of helped me a lot with that at times when I was feeling lonely or homesick. That would sort of be a distraction or a comfort. And then I realized, yeah, that's exactly what I did during lockdown, when suddenly the entire diary was empty, and you have to make a structure for yourself to stay sort of grounded. And so that was a funny realization.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds scary to me, like because it's kind of like double isolation when you like
Yeah,
really think about it.
yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
I mean, well done with it. I mean, I'm quite impressed with the video that I saw.
Thank
So
you
yeah,
very much.
another question that I have is like, have you ever faced a creative block? Like, if yes, then how did you overcome it?
Yeah, definitely. So about a year ago, I went to Portugal with my former classmates from UAL, and we did a residency there in a pencil factory, Viarco it's called, and it was just amazing because we could, for 2 weeks, we could sort of freely play around with their materials, and it was just a lot of fun and a lot of experimenting. But then when I got home, I was sort of confronted with my old way of working, which is very precise and very um, yeah, there's not, I have all these sort of rules set for myself within my practice, which can be good because you have some sort of structure. But now that I had tasted sort of the playfulness of this other way of working, I found it very difficult to decide which I should do. And then also around the same time, I moved into my apartment where I live now in Amsterdam, so that was taking up a lot of my attention. And also, I started working a part-time job, so were a lot of distractions from the art making process. So I got into this creative block for about half a year, I'd say, which was pretty terrifying because you don't really, you try all these things to get out of it, but uh, you don't know what's going to work or when you are going to get out of it. But then the lockdown came here, and I work in a museum, so all of the museums closed, so I didn't have a job anymore. And then I also work with this theater group, um, and obviously the theater is closed as well. So yeah, again, my diary was sort of completely empty all of a sudden, and um, that sort of created a lot of space to refocus um, on making art. And also, I first spent like a month sort of still doing things around the house that needed to be done, or sort of what also really helped was that I sorted through a lot of artworks from either my bachelor's that I made during my bachelor's degree, or even as a child, and that actually really helped to look back on why I was motivated then to do things, and to see the steps that I've taken over the years. So that was really what helped me to get over it. And then I started making art again.
Wow. That's inspiring actually because yeah, I think most of the artists like one or the other time they face kind of creative block and it's really interesting to know how they overcome it because that period is quite frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely it's frustrating. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I hope people get inspired by your story as well. So yeah, I mean, I have a last question which like I want to know two pros and two cons of making art during the student life and as an independent artist.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, so I'd say one of the pros of the student life is all of the sort of resources you get as a student and the workshops you can use, and because it's a lot harder when you're an independent artist to sort of organize that for yourself. um, yeah, and the libraries and everything like that, so that's a major pro of the student life. um, and also I think that you have sort of a very safe space to create your work in, and you're all sort of in the same boat as students, so there's this sense of community as well. um, yeah, I think that's a big plus. And cons for student life, um, I think during my bachelor's degree, especially, I sort of was very worried about what the teachers would think, and I felt the need that I felt that I needed to justify myself for every step that I took within my artwork. And that can be very limiting, because I think that a better mindset is to sort of go into it curious and not really knowing what you're doing, but then the meaning comes afterwards. Whereas during my bachelor's degree, I would feel the pressure to sort of turn that around before I even made something. So yeah, that was very limiting. And then as an independent artist, well, yeah, it's kind of the opposite. So you don't need to justify yourself to anyone. And also sometimes in the academic life, you can feel sort of the pressure of having to working with deadlines, which can be a positive as well, because it gives you some sort of structure. But also, if you want to, sometimes that means you don't get enough time to really go in depth in a certain subject. Or as an independent artist, you have all the time you want to go as much in depth as you want. So yeah, and as a con for independent artists, I really now miss the to share a studio with others, because I work from home now. I have a studio here, but it was so inspiring during my years at the academy to see works of other people, even see them progress, and to get feedback, obviously, but also to get inspired by their works. So I really miss that now. And you can still have that now, but you have to chase it, sort of. So you have to make it happen for yourself. And also, yeah, the last con is for independent artist life is that you I find it really hard to motivate myself to do theoretic research. So yeah, because we don't get assignments to do theses anymore. Yeah, that's really difficult to sort of go in depth on a subject theoretically.
Yes, makes sense. So yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap up now, and thank you so much for this insightful session, and I hope we get to see your art. I will definitely like link all the things, your website and YouTube and everything below.
Yeah,
So yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this for us.
yeah.
Um, yeah, bye.